Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I am Danielle, aka Stitcherista here on YouTube, and today is another diamond paint with me while I continue working on Treasure Studios art Cherry Blossom by Lizzie Falcon. I really want to get this diamond painting done. I feel like I got a good chunk done yesterday. I diamond painted for about 40 minutes. And I feel like that this week I may really concentrate working on this. I really want to get it done so I can get Maleficent up there and start a new one, right? Yeah, I could not remember when I started this diamond painting. Not diamond painting in general, cherry blossom. I have no idea. I know it's been months though. It has to be. So yesterday, the work day, I usually cannot get through a work day without having issues, technical issues, people issues. And, there's other things going on that has me, my default is negative. I don't know if that's a result of my upbringing. I know obviously your upbringing has an influence on how you approach everything else in your adult life. But those of you that have a good attitude, how do you cultivate that? I feel like it's like building a muscle, like it's conscious, like you have to consciously choose that. And I listened to Joyce Meyer, and I've been listening to a lot of Joel Osteen. I listened to him last night when I was diamond painting instead of watching a movie. And I listened to him this morning when I was getting ready. And he told a story, and I loved it. So here is the story very quickly. So a couple moves into a neighborhood, and they're having breakfast one morning, and the wife notices their neighbor hanging out laundry on the line, and she's like, "Oh my God, the laundry is so dirty looking. This woman must not know how to wash clothes properly." And every morning for a week, she made the same comment to her husband. She just couldn't believe it. How does this woman not know how to do laundry? She must not be using the right soap, blah, blah, blah. Well, one morning she wakes up and she looks out, and the clothes are pristine and perfectly clean and wonderful. And she says to her husband, "Wow, that woman finally figured out how to wash laundry." And he's like, "No, honey, I cleaned our windows." I loved that because it is most of the time our perspective on something. If you have a perspective, how you have the perspective on something. Do you know what I mean? So it wasn't the problem at all with the neighbor's laundry. It was that woman's window was dirty. So I say to myself, okay, is my window dirty? Do you know what I mean? Like, I really try to get up every day, have a good attitude. This is the day that I'm glad to be alive, blah, blah, blah. And, I do believe in God. I believe that there is, don't know what he or she looks like. I believe that there is something in the universe. There is a higher power. So if you do believe that and you trust in that, you put your trust in that higher power, that everything is happening for the greater good, well, then everything's always going to work out how it's supposed to. I don't know. Bill is the kind of person who wants to help people all the time. I feel like that's his love language. Like, he gets immense satisfaction from doing that. Not that I don't want to help people, but where it winds up hurting me or inconveniencing me, that's not helpful. You know what I mean? Like, I wish I was a different kind of person. And I don't even want to wish that, because everyone's unique. I should be very happy with the person that I am, but it's just having a difficult time here recently. But yeah, how do you cultivate a good attitude to handle problems? Because everyone's got them. Everyone's going to have them. There's always going to be something going on. But okay, so Yeah, yesterday work was glad when that day was done. We do have a job today. It starts at 11. I am recording this voiceover at 10, so got some time. And the book I'm reading is very, very good. I'm wondering who is doing this to this woman. So I read for a good 40 minutes this morning. And today is my stepfather's birthday. I gave him his present. He wanted a book, so I gave him that on Saturday. And yeah, I'm hoping today is just a good work day or an okay work day. Okay, so today's story is called Creeping Death. Jody Sanderholm was 19 years old, fresh out of high school, and attending her first year at Cowley Community College in Arkansas City, Kansas. An attractive brunette, Jody was outgoing, with a winning personality that had gained her a large circle of friends. She loved nothing more than dancing and was a member of the Cowley College dance squad, the Tigerettes. Back in 2007, when the story takes place, Jody had a predictable weekday routine. After class, she would attend a practice session with her fellow Tigerettes. Then she would head home, always stopping at the top of the drive to empty the mailbox. She would then head inside and eat a quick lunch before hitting the shower. Shortly after, the phone would ring. Jody's mom, Cindy, called unfailingly every day to ensure that her daughter had arrived home safely. On the afternoon of Friday, January 5th, 2007, Cindy's call went unanswered. And that reminded me of something when I was middle school, high school. My mom did not divorce my brother's father until I was 18, until I was graduating high school. He had credit cards that my mom didn't know about. So every day, and I am not exaggerating, we got home from school at about 2:30. The phone would be ringing as I was walking in the door. He would have me check the mail and then read, tell him what was in it. And then he would be like, well, put that in my top dresser drawer. So he was hiding mail from my mother. And, as a child, that's not right. But I never told my mother. And I don't know. I think about those kinds of stories, and I feel like I'm surprised I never turned to drugs or alcohol or something that really took my life in a horrible direction. Yeah. Okay. So at first, Cindy wasn't overly alarmed. She figured that her timing was off and that Jody was still in the shower. But when several more calls failed to get a response, she started to worry, and eventually she asked if she could leave work early to check on her daughter, and she arrived home to an empty house. So now Cindy really was concerned because a quick check of the mailbox told her that Jody had been home because there was no mail in the mailbox. Next, Cindy phoned her husband, and between the two of them, they started working the lines, calling all of Jody's friends. No one had seen her since she had left dance practice earlier that afternoon, and by 6 p.m., having exhausted all other avenues, the Sanderholms called in the police. So a short while later, a police officer arrived at the Sanderholm residence to obtain some details from the anxious family. One of the first questions he asked was whether Jody had a boyfriend. Cindy said that she did, but that the young man, David Maringer, was out of town for a few days visiting his brother in Texas. That offered at least a glimmer of hope because perhaps Jody had gone on the trip with her boyfriend and failed to tell her parents. Cindy thought it unlikely, but the police tracked down Maringer anyway, and he swore that he hadn't seen Jody since leaving town the previous day. So this was now an official missing persons case. By that evening, a full-scale search was underway for the missing co-ed. It found no trace of either Jody or her car, a black Dodge Stratus. In the meantime, investigators began questioning Jody's friends and classmates. Asked if they had seen anything untoward, several of the girls mentioned a creepy man who liked to hang around the college campus and often sat watching the Tigerettes' practice sessions. Some of the girls knew him by name. He was 23-year-old Justin Thurber, an employee at a local sandwich shop. Thurber was not exactly unknown to the Arkansas City Police. He was a petty criminal who had been picked up on several misdemeanors. Currently, he was out on bond, having been arrested for theft. Local law enforcement regarded him as more of a nuisance than a menace. Nonetheless, an officer was dispatched to question Thurber at the home he shared with his parents. Asked where he had been that afternoon, Thurber said that he had been heading out of town on a road trip with 3 friends. However, his car had spun off the road and become stuck in the mud. They had had to abandon their trip, and Thurber had then walked for some distance to where he could get a cell phone signal. From there, he had called his father and asked for a ride home. Thurber Sr. confirmed this, saying that he had picked up his son on Highway 166 near the Cowley State Fishing Lake. So, at this point, it appeared that Justin Thurber had been cleared of involvement in Jody's disappearance. Perhaps he was just a creep who liked to ogle pretty college girls. But Thurber's alibi would soon begin to creak and then would collapse entirely. First, officers drove out to the spot where his vehicle had supposedly left the road. Such an incident would have left deep tire impressions on the shoulder, and they found none. Then Thurber's friends were questioned and denied being with him that afternoon. Each of the men also provided an alibi which cleared them of involvement, but proved that Thurber had lied about his whereabouts. Well, why would the father lie also? I guess to protect your child? So Justin had just elevated himself to the top of the suspect list. At this point, however, there was nothing to directly link Thurber to Jody's disappearance. Moreover, Thurber had never been arrested for any violent offense. Seeking to learn more about their suspect, investigators started talking to some of his acquaintances. An ex-girlfriend provided them with the most troubling insight. She said that Thurber was frequently violent during sex. She also pointed out 2 remote areas that Thurber was fond of visiting. One was the Call Wildlife area where Thurber had told her was the perfect place to hide a body. Okay. The other was the state fishing lake where Thurber's father had admitted picking him up. So Jody had by now been missing for 24 hours, and the search to find her had been massively expanded with a helicopter hired for the effort. The Kansas Bureau of Investigation had entered the fray, offering its help. Local news stations were providing wall-to-wall coverage. Missing person posters were going up all over town. In the meantime, the police had obtained security footage from the parking lot at Cowley College, and they soon picked up Jody's car, leaving the area just after midday on January 5th. Trailing close behind her was a blue Cadillac, similar to the one owned by Justin Thurber. So it was time to bring him in for questioning. With insufficient evidence to arrest Thurber in connection with Jody's disappearance, the police decided on the next best thing and had his bond in the theft case revoked. Thurber was taken into custody while driving back from a bingo game with his mother and sister. He offered no resistance. He would, however, prove a tough nut to crack in the interrogation room, sticking doggedly to his story even when much of it was exposed as a lie. So, while the interrogation continued, a team of investigators arrived at Thurber's home armed with a search warrant. They were hoping for something that might provide a forensic link to Jody, but they would leave disappointed. Thurber had already laundered the clothes he had worn on Friday and had hosed down his sneakers, but they were bagged anyway. The sneakers, with their distinctive herringbone tread pattern, were of particular interest. They might prove useful if and when the police found a crime scene. At this point in the investigation, they could not even say for certain that a crime had been committed. I mean, without finding her body, right? But that was to change. Investigators had by now decided to focus their search on 2 locations, Cowley State Fishing Lake and the Call Wildlife Area, a rugged wilderness of over 400 acres. To cover this vast expanse, the police called in a couple of brothers with a unique skill set. Ron and John Cannon were firefighters by day, but had an interesting hobby. They were elite trackers trained in the art of following spoor. What the hell is spoor? Let me see. Spoor is the track or scent of an animal. Okay. At the wildlife area, the brothers soon picked up 2 sets of tracks, 2 individuals walking together. One set of prints left a herringbone pattern similar to that made by Justin Thurber's sneakers. The other appeared to have been made by a flip-flop. Following this trail led the searchers deeper and deeper into the brush, and eventually they came upon a lone flip-flop lying by the side of the trail. Jody had been wearing just such a pair when she had left school. From this point on, they detected only one set of tracks, and unfortunately it was getting dark by now. They would have to call off the search and resume at first light. The day had yielded some promising clues, but still left the key questions unanswered. Where was Jody? What had become of her? I'm guessing, unfortunately, she's probably dead. The searchers were contemplating these conundrums as they headed back into town, along a route that would take them down Highway 166 past the spot where Thurber's father had picked him up. Here, Ron Cannon asked them to pull over. On a hunch, the tracker started scanning the ground, walking towards a concrete apron where he picked up clumps of mud, possibly left behind by someone's shoes. Following these led him to a public restroom. In the fading light he entered, walked into the first stall, and peered into the bowl. His flashlight picked up something in there, which he fished out. It was an envelope addressed to Jody Sanderholm, so the missing mail had been found. Wow. So not wanting to disturb evidence, Cannon immediately stepped away and placed a call to the sheriff. A short while later, officers were on the scene to conduct a thorough search. They soon found additional evidence hidden in the septic tank, the matching flip-flop to the one they had located earlier, and a Cowley College windbreaker with the Tigerettes logo emblazoned across the back. So now the police knew they were on the right track, right? They also knew with almost complete certainty that Jody would not be found alive. And that tragically would prove to be the case. Jody's naked body was found the next morning, concealed behind or beneath a pile of sticks and branches beside a track in the Call Wildlife Area. An autopsy would provide the details of her horrific death. Jody had been strangled, but that told only a small part of the story. Her death had not been quick. It appeared that her killer had throttled her into unconsciousness several times, each time reviving her before choking her out again. He had also beaten her, striking her so hard that he had ruptured major blood vessels. And if that were not enough, this is tough to read, he had sexually violated her, forcing sticks and tree branches into her vagina and anus. She had died a painful, protracted death. As a parent, or even a relative, when you find out that your child or niece or whatever died in that manner, I don't know how you ever get over that or have that out of your brain. I don't know how you would ever be able to let that go. I think about that all the time when we watch like 2020 and things like that. If I ever had a family member or a close friend that was murdered, I don't know how do you just, I don't know. So, what kind of a monster would inflict such harm on an innocent young woman? The police thought they knew the answer to that, and the evidence would soon mount up to support their case. Shoe impressions were lifted from the Call Wildlife Area and from the Sanderholm residence. These were compared to Justin Thurber's sneakers and produced a match. Then the police called in a volunteer group called EquuSearch to look for Jody's missing car, which they believed was hidden beneath the murky waters of the state fishing lake. The group uses sonar equipment for this purpose and soon had success. The Dodge Stratus was found submerged near a wooden dock. Painstaking forensic examination of the vehicle would produce a single hair, Justin Thurber's hair, matched to him by DNA. Additional evidence came from skin cells retrieved from under Jody's fingernails. This, too, matched Thurber. So, obviously, we know he did it. I want to know why. What happened? So, reconstructing the crime, investigators theorized that Thurber had followed Jody home from school and abducted her in her driveway. He had then driven her in her own car to the Call Wildlife Area where he had forced her into the brush. At one point, Jody had refused to go any further, and Thurber had picked her up and carried her. This was the spot where the first flip-flop was found. Eventually, reaching an isolated spot, he had attacked the helpless young woman, spending at least a half hour terrorizing and hurting her. He had also tried to rape her, but had been unable to do so. Instead, he violated her with sticks. Finally, he tired of his sick games and strangled her. Then he had hidden the body, walked back to the car, and driven to State Fishing Lake. Here, he disposed of evidence in the restroom before pushing the car into the water. And finally, he walked to the road and called his father for a ride home. And by the time news of Jody's disappearance broke the next day, he was playing bingo with his mother and sister. So Justin went on trial for murder in February of 2009. After a hearing lasting 1 week, the jury took just 3 hours to deliver its unanimous verdict, which was guilty. It also offered a sentencing recommendation, which the judge delivered on March 20th, 2009. Thurber was sentenced to death by lethal injection. He is currently an inmate at the El Dorado Correctional Facility in Butler County, Kansas, awaiting his date with the executioner. So, in the aftermath of Jody's murder, the state of Kansas passed new legislation authorizing the police to intervene sooner in stalking cases, and this legislation is known as Jody's Law. But she had never reported Justin stalking her. That was the thing. Like, I'm guessing if these girls he probably seemed harmless if he just watched them do their cheerleading routine. But we don't know if he had stalked her before that, right? I don't know. Such an awful story. And it makes you like literally afraid to just go out of your house, right? Like that this can just happen in broad daylight. It's frightening. It truly, truly is frightening. I mean, I remember when I was at the retreat in Ocean City a couple weeks ago, the night before I left to go home, I was packing and I'm like, I'm going to take some stuff down to the car. And I took it down to the car because the parking garage was well lit. But I'm like, if anybody was following me or out there, something could have easily happened. Although there was tons of cops around because of the car people that were there. But I did almost consider not going down to the parking garage. It was like 10 o'clock at night. That's when things happen. Like that's when, yeah. So all I can say is all we can do is be as careful as we can. I keep the door locked here at the house all the way until Bill's ready to come home. I have the Ring doorbell, which is probably one of the most fantastic things I've ever purchased for this house. That's all you can do. But you have to, and then on the other end of the spectrum, you have to live your life though too, right? But it's just awful, all of these crimes that happen to these people. It's just so supremely awful. But okay, I hope you guys are all having a good Wednesday. As always, if you have any questions, please leave them in the comments section below, and I will answer them to the best of my ability. Thank you so much for watching and subscribing, and I will see you in my next video. Bye, guys.